Ethiopia's election was a performance, not a democracy. To witness a masterclass in political theater, one only needs to look at the voting booths set up across Ethiopia this week. Prosperity Party banners wave under the Horn of Africa's sun, while state media celebrates what it calls a triumph of democratic expression. But beneath the government's polished image, this election looks far less like democracy and far more like a carefully staged illusion. The most obvious absurdity begins with the regime's own numbers. Ethiopia's National Election Board claims that more than 50 million people have registered to vote. It is an astonishing figure for a country that has repeatedly failed to conduct a credible national census, leaving even its own population estimates uncertain. The demographics make the claim even harder to believe. In a youthful nation, where over 40% of the population is under 15, and another 6% fall into the 15 to 17 ineligible teenage cohort, nearly half the country is legally disqualified from voting due to age. Claiming 50.5 million registered voters out of an estimated 130 to 135 million total population leaves an impossibly narrow margin for error. It implies that an astonishing 70% to 75% of every single eligible adult across the country was successfully registered, reaching a registration rate that exceeds stable, highly digitized Western democracies. Even if one accepts the voter rolls at face value, the reality on the ground destroys any illusion of a truly national election. The federal government does not fully control large parts of the country. In regions like Amhara, ongoing war and military crackdowns have turned entire rural areas into conflict zones. Tigray, meanwhile, remains largely absent from the federal political process. A credible national election cannot exist when entire regions are too unstable for officials to safely enter, let alone organize voting. Where the state does maintain control, participation is driven by pressure and coercion. In rural farming communities, reports suggest the government has tied political participation to basic survival. Farmers seeking access to state-subsidized fertilizer are allegedly being required to register and vote for the ruling party. This is not a democratic. It is rather a cruel example of a government using economic vulnerability as leverage for political control. For those unwilling to participate in the performance, or bold enough to criticize it, the consequences are severe. Ethiopia's political system is reinforced by a vast network of detention centers holding thousands of opposition figures and political prisoners. Independent journalists, activists, and critics have also been jailed. Many simply for documenting and speaking openly about the country's crisis. Any meaningful political alternative is weakened long before ballots are ever cast. A functioning democracy depends on certain basic conditions: reliable population data, a free press, political competition, public trust, and safe access to the ballot box. One by one, those foundations have been dismantled. What remains is not a competitive democratic process, but an election engineered for a predictable outcome. What Ethiopia witnessed was not a genuine election. It was a political performance aimed at securing foreign legitimacy and domestic obedience while lacking of any real democratic substance.